the power hidden in quiet. Sometimes the loudest statement you can make is saying nothing at all. In a world where everyone scrambles to be heard, where social media rewards outrage and instant reaction, silence has become a lost art. Yet, in the shadows of manipulation and deceit, silence can be a sword sharper than words. When you're up against someone who twists truth, provokes chaos, and feeds off emotional reactions, your calm refusal to engage can unsettle them more than any argument ever could. Silence is not surrender, it is strategy. It is the calm before the counterstrike. Niccolò Machiavelli, the master of political cunning, understood this centuries ago. He taught that power belongs not to those who shout the loudest, but to those who control the flow of information, including what is withheld. In The Prince, Machiavelli didn't just write about kings and conquerors, he wrote about human nature in its rawest form: pride, insecurity, ambition, and fear. His wisdom applies not only to rulers, but to anyone navigating manipulation in everyday life, in relationships, workplaces, or politics. When facing toxic manipulators, adopting a Machiavellian mindset doesn't mean becoming cold or cruel. It means becoming strategically self-possessed. This video explores the art of strategic silence, how withholding words can disarm, expose, and outmaneuver those who use deception and emotional pressure as their weapons. Through Machiavellian principles and modern psychology, we'll uncover why silence is not weakness, but a deliberate act of dominance, how to use it without losing empathy, and how it can protect your peace, strengthen your presence, and reclaim power from those who seek to control you. 1. Understanding the manipulator, the enemy of stillness. To master silence, you first need to understand what it threatens. Manipulators fear silence because it deprives them of control. Their strength comes from reaction, from making you defend, justify, or explain yourself. They thrive in chaos, in noise, in drama. The moment you go quiet, the script they've rehearsed no longer works. A toxic manipulator is not always easy to identify at first. Some wear masks of charm, vulnerability, or even competence. They might flood you with flattery, share too much too soon, or play the victim to lure empathy. But as Machiavelli warned, everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. The manipulator's true face appears in patterns, conversations that leave you doubting yourself, sudden guilt trips when you set boundaries, or subtle distortions of truth that make you question your memory. Their ultimate aim is dominance, emotional, psychological, or social, achieved by controlling the narrative. When you react, you reveal. You show them your fears, insecurities, and the emotional buttons they can press. This is why Machiavelli insisted that leaders, and by extension anyone seeking autonomy, must observe without revealing. He advised rulers to be a great pretender and dissembler, meaning not to lie for cruelty's sake, but to master self-control. In the arena of manipulation, silence is the modern translation of that advice. When you stop explaining yourself to someone who only listens to twist your words, you remove their leverage. Your silence becomes a mirror that forces them to confront their own noise. 2. The Machiavellian logic of silence. To understand why silence is so powerful, we have to think like Machiavelli. He believed power was built on perception. Control how people see you, and you control how they treat you. In the same way, when you engage a manipulator, you play on their field. But when you remain silent, calm, unreadable, unmoved, you flip the power dynamic. Suddenly they're reacting to you. In The Prince, Machiavelli warns against being too transparent. He argued that a wise leader reveals intentions only when it serves a purpose. In manipulation, this translates to strategic opacity, the art of giving away less than what is expected. Every word you withhold is a boundary. Every pause is a test of their control. Manipulators crave predictability. They want to know how you'll respond so they can prepare their next move. Silence strips them of that predictability. It creates uncertainty, and uncertainty creates discomfort, the one thing manipulators cannot stand. Furthermore, silence forces introspection, not just for them, but for you. It shifts the focus from reacting to reflecting. It allows you to observe patterns instead of being caught in them. Machiavelli believed that the wise must know how to enter into evil, when forced by necessity, meaning, learn the language of manipulation without becoming part of it. Strategic silence embodies that principle, a disciplined refusal to play by the manipulator's script. In that stillness, you're not powerless, you're planning, you're studying. And when you finally choose to speak, every word lands with the weight of intention. 3. Why silence works against manipulators. Silence is more than the absence of speech. It is a disruption of control. Manipulators thrive on reactions. They bait emotional responses to confirm they still hold power over your mood, attention, and decisions. When you stay silent, you break their rhythm. Their manipulative tactics, guilt trips, false accusations, dramatic monologues, rely on a predictable response. They want you to protest, explain, or apologize. But when you refuse to feed their performance, you starve the script. What follows is confusion, agitation, and, eventually, exposure. They start to talk more, to fill the uncomfortable void, and in doing so, reveal their true motives. From a Machiavellian perspective, this makes perfect sense. Machiavelli often wrote that perception governs power more than truth itself. He advised rulers to appear merciful, faithful, humane, sincere, religious, yet act in whatever way necessity demands. In silence, you appear calm, reasonable, and unshaken, a contrast to the manipulator's growing desperation. Your restraint highlights their instability. It creates a psychological contrast that silently tells others, I am in control, they are not. This shift in perception is the essence of strategic dominance. Moreover, silence removes the manipulator's favorite weapon, emotional entanglement. Every argument they start is a fishing line cast into your emotions. When you answer, you get hooked. Silence, however, is the refusal to bite. You stand outside their emotional theater, watching rather than participating. Over time, this teaches the manipulator that you can't be baited, and nothing frustrates or weakens them more than losing that control. Silence, used consistently, rewires the dynamic. You go from prey to observer, from the manipulated to the unmovable. 4. The psychological impact of silence. On the surface, silence looks passive. Psychologically, it's one of the most active and disarming tools you can use. When you respond with silence to manipulation, you trigger a cognitive tension known as the need for closure. Most manipulators rely on dominating conversation. They talk to steer, distract, and distort. But when you don't react, you force them into an uncomfortable mental state. They can no longer read you, and uncertainty eats at their confidence. This cognitive discomfort often drives them to expose their intentions more openly in their scramble to regain control. For you, the psychological impact of silence is empowerment. You move from reaction to reflection. Instead of defending yourself impulsively, you pause long enough to see the game. Silence becomes a mental shield, a space where you can assess their motives and your own emotions before speaking. It builds self-control, which Machiavelli considered a ruler's greatest asset. He believed that people often lose power not through weakness, but through uncontrolled reactions. When you cultivate silence, you train your mind to stay deliberate even when provoked, a vital defense against emotional manipulation. Silence also projects emotional maturity and strength to bystanders. In toxic environments, offices, families, social circles, manipulators often rely on public performance. They want witnesses, but when you refuse to engage in drama, you force observers to notice the contrast, one person escalating, the other unbothered. Over time, this creates a narrative reversal. The manipulator, once perceived as persuasive, begins to look erratic. The silent one begins to look composed, wise, in control. That perception shift is the silent revolution Machiavelli would admire most. Victory achieved not by confrontation but by mastery of self. 5. The discipline behind the strategy. Silence might sound simple, but it demands immense discipline. It's easy to preach restraint. It's much harder to stay composed when someone is lying, provoking, or twisting your words. Machiavelli understood that power requires inner control, the ability to act not on impulse but on intention. To stay silent when attacked is not weakness, it's warfare waged with restraint. It takes emotional regulation to sit through manipulation without reacting. But that discipline is what separates those who are controlled from those who command control. Practicing strategic silence means training your emotions like a warrior trains their reflexes. Before entering any interaction, you must anchor yourself. What do I want from this exchange? What reaction are they trying to pull from me? When you predict their tactics, you stop being surprised by them. Machiavelli would call this knowing the terrain, understanding the battlefield before the fight begins. Every manipulator has patterns. When you've seen them enough times, you learn to anticipate the bait, smile internally, and stay quiet. That's how you win wars without ever raising your voice. Lastly, discipline means knowing when silence must end. Machiavellian silence isn't about disappearing, it's about timing. The purpose of restraint is to conserve your words until they have maximum impact. When you finally do speak, it should be brief, factual, and final. A manipulator expects emotion, instead give them precision. The pause before your words is your sharpening stone, your voice after silence is the blade. That's the art of power, not constant dominance but controlled deployment. Silence is the sheath. Speech, when finally drawn, should strike clean and end the game. 6. Silence as self-preservation. Silence is not just strategy, it's survival. Toxic manipulators drain your energy by keeping you emotionally reactive. They pull you into endless cycles of argument, justification, and confusion. Each word you offer becomes material for their next move. They twist your explanations, weaponize your honesty, and feed off your frustration. But when you refuse to engage, you protect your mental space. Silence becomes a shield, a boundary that says, I will not hand you my peace for free. Machiavelli might call this preserving the fortress. A ruler's first duty is to guard their stronghold. Your mind and emotions are that fortress. Self-preservation through silence isn't about cold detachment. It's about emotional sustainability. Constant engagement with manipulators erodes self-esteem and clarity. Silence interrupts that erosion. It gives you space to breathe, to think, to remember who you are outside their distortion. When you stop reacting, you begin observing, and in that stillness you rediscover your own logic. You see the manipulation for what it is, projection, insecurity, or control disguised as care. Machiavelli understood that seeing reality clearly without being blinded by emotion is the foundation of power. Silence gives you that vision. Over time, silence rebuilds self-trust. Manipulators condition you to doubt yourself. They make you question your memory, your motives, your worth. Every quiet moment you claim back from them is an act of rebellion. It's saying, I no longer explain myself to those who twist explanations into weapons. Self-preserving silence reaffirms autonomy. It's not withdrawal. It's healing through sovereignty. You are no longer participating in their chaos, and that alone destabilizes their power. Machiavelli would call this victory without conflict, the highest form of power. 7. Turning silence into presence. Strategic silence is not the same as absence. When used properly, silence doesn't make you invisible. It makes you magnetic. True presence isn't about filling space with sound. It's about commanding space with energy. The quiet person who knows their value radiates a calm that unsettles manipulators and attracts respect from others. Machiavelli taught that rulers must appear strong, even when silent, because authority often depends on how others perceive your confidence. Silence, when rooted in self-assurance, projects that confidence louder than words ever could. Turning silence into presence means communicating through posture, eye contact, and timing. You don't need to shout to be heard, you need to make your pauses matter. When you choose not to respond immediately, or at all, you show that your attention is scarce, that your energy is earned. Manipulators hate this because attention is their currency. They crave constant acknowledgement, validation, or defense. By being selectively silent, you deny them both attention and control. Your composure forces others to measure their words, to fill the silence carefully, because you've turned stillness into dominance. Machiavelli understood this principle deeply. He argued that appearances govern influence, and that the illusion of strength often accomplishes more than strength itself. Strategic silence reinforces that illusion. It builds an aura of mystery and restraint that keeps others guessing about your thoughts and limits. In a world of oversharing, the person who holds back becomes unpredictable, and unpredictability is power. Silence turns you from a target into a presence that must be respected. It transforms defensiveness into quiet authority, fear into focus, and reaction into command. 8. When and how to break the silence. The art of silence is incomplete without knowing when to break it. Silence is powerful, but it must serve purpose, not pride. Machiavelli warned that excessive caution can be as dangerous as reckless talk. The goal is balance. To know when to stay quiet and when to speak with precision. When you finally decide to break silence, your words should come after observation, not impulse. They should be sharp, brief, and impossible to twist. Each sentence must be a scalpel, not a storm. Breaking silence effectively begins with timing. The longer you hold your ground, the more your words gain weight. People notice when someone who rarely speaks chooses to do so. That's why your first words after silence should establish control, not apology. A manipulator expects emotion. Give them calm logic instead. They expect justification. Give them clarity. They expect debate. Give them boundaries. A simple "that's not accurate" or "I'm not discussing this further" can close an entire chapter with the authority of a final decree. You don't have to explain yourself. You just have to decide you're done explaining. Machiavelli's ideal leader knew when to appear merciful and when to act decisively. The same principle applies here. Silence is your preparation, speech is your execution. The moment you choose to break it, you're no longer reacting, you're asserting. Every silence before that point has been sharpening your discernment. Every pause has been collecting power. When you finally speak, it isn't to win the manipulator's approval. It's to end their influence. That's the final act of strategic silence, to speak only when your words become actions. The mastery of quiet power. Conclusion. There comes a point in every battle with manipulation where you realize the fight was never about who speaks louder. It was about who stays clearer. The manipulator's goal is always confusion, to drown you in noise until you forget your own truth. But the moment you stop reacting, their spell weakens. Silence reveals what noise conceals. You begin to see patterns, motives, and truths that once hid behind your defensiveness. That clarity is your freedom. Machiavelli would say that power belongs to those who see reality as it is, not as they wish it to be. And silence is what gives you that vision. The art of strategic silence isn't about cold detachment or passive aggression. It's about emotional sovereignty, the ability to stay grounded even in the presence of chaos. Every time you refuse to explain yourself to someone who isn't listening in good faith, you reclaim power. Every time you hold your peace instead of proving your point, you protect your mind from manipulation. Silence doesn't mean agreement. It means I choose my battles. It means you no longer have access to my reactions. That is the core of Machiavellian wisdom. To control your impulses, to know when to speak and when to stay silent, to recognize that power lies not in constant motion, but in calculated restraint. In today's world, noise is constant. People shout opinions, defend egos, and expose their emotions to anyone who'll listen. But real strength, the kind Machiavelli would respect, lies in those who do not need to prove themselves every minute. Strategic silence is the art of being unbothered in a world that profits from outrage. It is the discipline to observe before acting, to listen more than you speak, and to let others reveal themselves through their noise while you conserve your clarity. Because in the end, power doesn't belong to the loudest person in the room. It belongs to the one who doesn't need to speak to be understood. When you master silence, you stop chasing validation and start commanding respect. You move differently. You respond slower. You observe longer. You let truth reveal itself without forcing it. That's not weakness. That's control. And it's the kind of control Machiavelli knew could move kingdoms. And today it can move your own life. So, the next time someone tries to pull you into chaos, remember, your silence is not surrender, it's strategy. The quiet you keep today becomes the power you hold tomorrow.